Right, yeah, we don't have like any fancy intro music or anything like that. So I'm literally just going to say, welcome to episode 8 of the Big Picture Film Club podcast. Today we have a very good friend of the film club. Fun fact, our guest is one of, I want to say three. I want to say three. I'll say three. One of three directors to have their film screened twice at the film club in the 3 years of our being. Yes, it's an elite group you're part of. Joining us today is writer and director Mark J. Blackman.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How's you?
I'm good. Live, kicking. Just glad to be back. So we kind of took a little bit of a hiatus to focus on our events, build up stuff around the film club. So yeah, it was kind of good to. I know you'd been out in America for some time.
So kind of all over, yeah, sort of America a couple of times.
So we'll first start at Neon and Animus, because those were the two films we screened at our film club. And when I look back at them now, and I don't know if it was your intent in making this, they're both very, both well shot, and well produced love stories, but complete polar opposites of how you can tell a love story. So for those of you that don't know, Animus is, I mean, if you could describe very briefly Animus and Neon, and what those two films are.
I mean, Neon came first. I suppose I can do spoilers now. Neon, they're both online. You know, you can sort
spoil.
of
We'll put some links somewhere.
I'll plug. But yeah, Neon is sort of a very stylized genre romance. It's sort of got elements of fantasy. A lot of people say science fiction. That's more kind of based on the look of it, but it's effectively kind of a heaven and hell love story about sort of fallen angels without ever explicitly saying angels, but it's about sort of two characters who are kept apart even though they're in love across time, and how one of the characters sort of at his wit's end basically goes about to sort of end their misery, their collective misery of love. And it's, you know, it's sort of violent, very stylized, lots of rain machines, guns, special visual effects, practical effects. And then Animus is two characters talking over a cup of tea, who haven't seen each other for a long time. And it's sort of, I suppose thematically it kind of has some of the same stuff. It's that sort of bittersweet, darker side of love attribute. But yeah, it couldn't be further from Neon if it tried. I think Neon has just, it takes place across 3 different timelines. It's technically backwards and forwards at the same time. It has a whole heap of scenes. It's very complex. It's the kind of film that you watch it a second time, it means something slightly different. Whereas Animus is kind of a real-time conversation piece, really. Neon was shot over the course of about 5 days, and had a very hefty crew and some money to play with. Not a huge amount, but we really stretched it as far as we could and tried to make it look really dynamic. And then Animus is really a chamber piece. It could be a play. It's a very workshopped, nuanced sort of character piece that was developed with the main actors, Johnny and Katie, who sort of co-wrote it and developed the characters. So, couldn't be further apart.
So like post Neon and Animus, like what have you been up to in the last, I think, like year and a half?
It's been a while. It's been a while. Working mostly, day jobbing, which is the sort of got to get paid. I sort of direct full time, doing sort of corporates and music videos and brand films, and kind of sort of moving into commercials a little bit now.
How does that actually feed into, I guess, how you, sorry to cut you off, how you kind of stylize your own pet projects, your own personal work? Do you kind of separate the two in terms of the thought process, or is there stuff that feeds into the other? Or?
There's definitely stuff that feeds into each other. I mean, sort of, I like the people factor is a huge element. You're working with people all the time. You're learning new things. You're learning how to, when I say manipulate, I mean in a good way, but you might have someone who's difficult and you've got to get something that you need out of them, or you might have someone who's not giving it their all and you've got to kind of, get them up to the level that you need them. Technically, there's a huge amount of interplay, and sort of strangely, I mean, the corporate side of stuff, I mean, they're not necessarily the most dynamic sometimes visually. I mean, some of the ones I've done have been, huge drone shoots out in the Middle East and America and stuff. Taking off, massive, great big octocopters from the top of the Burj Khalifa and stuff. So they're really visually dynamic, but some of them are really sort of super fast turnaround, super lo-fi, tiny, crude little things. But what that does give you is an ability to know how to tell a story, how to really isolate what's important in any story. And, that's something that's definitely fed back into the filmmaking and really, really has sort of helped, both, I call it the day job, it's directing, no matter how you swing it, but they really do inform each other hugely. And I think, vice versa, like the drama filmmaking, which is, it's the main job, it's the main passion, has also kind of influenced, like the music videos have always been very, almost entirely drama based, they're all performance driven, they're narrative. Like Neon, if you look at some of the earlier music videos I've done, shares so much in the structural DNA of what they've done, playing with time, playing with chronology, playing with audience expectation. You don't get a chance to sort of pit that into the other, like the commercials or the brand films as much, but like visually, what works and what doesn't, what looks good, how to make, how to craft certain effects on a short time scale and on a budget. It's all money in the bank, and also it's great because when you get down to doing your films, someone says, oh, that's going to cost X amount. You go, no, it's not. We just need to do X, Y, and Z, and it'll cost half the amount, and we can do it in a quarter of the time. There's, all those little tricks that you pick up.
A brief and
hugely,
more,
and it's great.
Concise.
It's you work with great people as well. You work with brilliant people that you take onto your drama stuff, and vice versa. I know, like my favourite Steadicam operator that I've worked with. I've taken onto dramas, onto documentary work, and my favourite composer that I've one of my favourite composers, there are several, one of my favourite composers who I've worked with, I've taken onto sort of corporate gigs and got them sort of paid for doing stuff that's enjoyable for them, and it's great. It's a two-way street, it really is. And then going back to what I've been up to for the last year and a half, is writing. Basically, we're doing our first slate of features, so it's been a really
what I wanted to get.
That's where we're heading.
That was all that whole lead up for like 5
just speed
minutes.
through that bit. Just speed through that bit.
I was just really intrigued, like where you were going. Certainly through like Animus and Neon. Just the way you put together ideas, the way that Neon was stylized, particularly. So I was kind of like, well, when's the feature coming? When's the feature? Like, how does that look like? How does that? So I mean, you've got some ideas on the table.
Yeah, we're
now
quite a long way sort of down the development line. Really, it's one of those tricky things. I bumped into someone today in an edit suite, and they were like, "Oh, you're still making your film, still trying to get your film off the ground. Why haven't you done it yet?" And it's like it takes a while. I mean, you don't want to take too long because you run out of steam, and life has a way of sort of getting in the way. But it's not like a short, quick thing. I'd love to do a John Hughes, and he wrote Weird Science in 3 days. Some people say it shows. I think Weird Science is an absolute cracker. I think it's a dynamite script. It's can we swear? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's funny as fuck. Kelly LeBrock, big childhood thing. That's a whole other story. But it's a really, really fantastic script, and allegedly wrote it in 3 days. I don't know if that's true or not, but like the features, and like much like Neon, they're not simple, linear. A to B to C to D sort of stories. They're much more complex than that. And that's kind of, they take a long time to do, but also there's that element of not necessarily just having the one project. We've got 3 for the first slate. We've got another project that we might do before that, and then we've got the ones that are sort of the further down the line scripts. And in total, I've got 6 finished scripts that are all in about draft 4 to 6 stage. And then we've got 2 scripts that are draft sort of 1 to 2 stage, which are the further down the line, more expensive ones. But sort of doing Neon really kind of made me realise, and Animus as well, that as much as they're completely, couldn't be further apart, they're very much sort of speak about the sort of themes and tones that I'm interested in sort of getting out there. And also the sort of style of production. I mean, the first feature that there's 2 first features, but one's a very fast-moving, linear survival horror called Delayed, and then the other one's called The Siren, the Captain, the Sea, which is really, I don't want to say it's a mix of Neon and Animus, but if you could take the sort of the emotional core of Animus and put it in the style of Neon, that's what you've got, but also letting the actors breathe a lot more. It's sort of down that road. without going into any plot
No.
specifics.
So, I mean, I guess are you at the point where you can start looking at funding avenues and seeing kind of what works, who's out there, who's waving a check around? And
If you know where they are, please do let me know. No, we're at that stage. So Delayed sort of came to me in sort of a funny way in that it was another producer looking for a writer for a project. I loved the concept and came on and said I'd love to write the script, but I'd also like to direct it. Yeah. And then he saw Neon and was like, great, I'm down with that. And then that's been the fastest turnaround of any script. We're just about to start draft 5 the day after tomorrow, Wednesday, for a 30th delivery. But that's been, I think I did the first draft just before Christmas. And also it's kind of out of my comfort zone, that one, which is interesting because normally and not because I find it easy, but I love stories that hopscotch locations and multiple characters and multiple timelines. This one is a single location, real time. And it's really weird because I was like, oh, this is going to be a really tough write. And it's just been a real hoot to get through. But that one, in a way, is sort of, maybe the most marketable sort of first feature. So we're kind of sort of pitting that one on the plinth as the first one that we want to go for. The trailer would be dynamite. It's very violent, very funny. Would be a really good one for a really good sort of young cast of sort of up and comers to populate. As much as it's a single location horror, the characters are really well rounded and fun. I mean, they're fun parts to play. So that's where we're sort of at with the first one. So yeah, we're sort of hopefully getting the next draft of that done by the end of this month, and then we're putting the production package together and cracking on from there. And then if we get Sign the Captain the Seed going at the same time or afterwards, that's great. But we're sort of, strategizing, which, and again, takes time, especially if you're working it around a day job, or any job for that matter. It's, it's a commitment.
So, I mean, that kind of process, and it's actually like something I'd kind of like to dig into. How do you, so from the first draft to the 5th draft, how do you know when you've gone too far? How do you know when you've hit the mark? How do you consult among the writers or even producers?
It differs from thing to thing, but I think there are sort of consistencies, and it's finding out what works best for you as well. I mean, I've always written my own material. I've written stuff for other people. I've worked on other people's scripts, but generally I kind of enjoy working on stuff. Not because I haven't found great writers to work with, but I tend to find that once I've got that idea and get my claws into it, fingers, I don't know where I'm going, once I get stuck into it, so to speak, not in a weird way. Once I kind of get really sort of barreling into it, it's sort of, I tend to do kind of like a vomit draft, which is like a draft 0 that no one ever sees, and I just hammer the thing out. Vomit draft.
Is that a technical?
That's my technical. You can call it the puke draft, the bile cut, whatever you want to call it. But I find that helps. I can, over the years, I've sort of, I'll do kind of a beat sheet and I'll sort of plan things out to a degree. But for me, it's the ideas always start as a core emotion or a theme or a mood, or it's like hearing a piece of music that really sort of gets the hair on the back of your neck up. It's that sort of core idea, and it's not necessarily a plot. Yeah. Sometimes it's a character who you sort of feel an affinity for. You want to tell their story, or it's a situation that a character, it could be any number of things, but you sort of, I have to do my beat sheet, and then once I kind of feel like I'm ready, and once I've got a little window of time, because that's the biggest problem, is sort of scheduling it in, but I'll sort of try and take a week out and then just blaze through this vomit draft. It sounds horrible, but then you end up with this great big chunky thing that's, most of it's what you want it to be in there, some of it you didn't know was going to come out, and I make notes as I go along, go like, oof, that's bad, that's coming out, those two characters are going to become one character, that character's coming out all together. Yeah. But what I do is then stick it in a drawer. I don't actually have any drawers in my office. Stick it on the shelf, stick it on the digital shelf, and then go, take some jobs on for a couple of weeks, come back, with a fresh head and everything, and then kind of get stuck into it again. Okay. And that first draft I then send out to my producer, a couple of writing colleagues who are writers in their own right, get their feedback, and also with feedback, it's an interesting thing, is you've got to take what you want to take on board. You can have everyone tell you you're wrong about something, but if you feel in your gut you're right and you want to stick to that, it's on you, but it's important. But also you've got to go, if 100 people are telling you you're wrong, you've really got to listen to them. But that comes with experience, and then you do draft 2, draft 3, draft 4. In terms of knowing when you've gone too far, that's sort of a tough one, because I think there's certainly been projects in the past where I'm like, I overcooked it. I kind of went a bit too down the road with that idea, or a bit too ambiguous with this thing. But that, is normally something you don't really notice until you see the finished film, until you watch it with an audience even, which is one of the most precious things about seeing films with an audience at a film festival or a screening is gauging their reactions, because you can watch it with a bunch of associates, you can watch it with a bunch of people who've worked on the film with you, but until you watch it with an audience and you just go like, the timing of that's not quite on, or that's hitting better than I expected, or that's not as good as I expected, and you analyse why, and then you try and feed that into the script on the next one. But I think it's interesting not to overcook it and sort of put yourself into corners that you can't allow actors to bring their work to the table, or DOP or composer. You need to leave things a little bit loose here and there just to kind of let them get into it. But yeah, it's really, when it's ready, I think, and also it's keep working it until you make the thing. It's a funny one. It's never the same twice.
On that point about particularly like audience reaction, I just want to read you a quote and get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Yeah, we prepared.
Okay.
All right. So Steve McQueen, his interview with Uproxx just last week, said,
I read this.
Yeah, that's a good thing about cinema. There's no point looking at a movie on your laptop on your own at home. The thrill of cinema is to be in an audience with 200, 500 people, or 1,000 people watching something. And so with that in mind, how much consideration in your writing process do you give to how a film would be watched or viewed? Do you produce films explicitly with the intention that I imagine it to be viewed in a cinema?
I do now.
Okay.
I think Neon, and not that it was something that I ignored or sort of avoided, but it wasn't something that Neon and Animus, I think, were easily the films that I've watched the most with an audience. They're the films that have gone out to the most festivals. They're the films that we've sort of, got out there the most and sort of sat down with people and watched them. But I think it's part of sort of, your development as a filmmaker. You should make films for yourself. You should make films that speak to your passions and interests and sensibilities, or say something about the world as you see it, be it explicit or not.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there is an element where it's kind of a bit of a business. You want the audience to dig it and see the next one. So there's, not to be cynical, but you've got to keep the audience. I mean, all of our stuff's been self-financed, all of our films up to this stage, with a little bit of money coming in from here and there, but mostly self-financed. So at the end of the day, I can make films, and if I want to work my arse off for 6 months and go make Neon, I don't care if anyone else likes that film. If I like that film, that's all that really matters. The circle closes with my involvement, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's not the point of filmmaking. That's not the point of storytelling. That's not why I want to make Neon. That's an alternate version of me could say that. Could go do a Vincent Gallo and say I've made 3 feature films after the Brown Bunny that no one's ever going to see because fuck you. That's what, I'm an artist and I make my art for me.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It is about sitting there with an audience and being surprised by them and being inspired by them as well. Like when we made Neon, we finished. I can't even remember where we were filming. We were filming in sort of some estate somewhere, and it's over Stratford. It's Stratford Way. It's an old empty tower block, which is fantastic. It pops up in every film. It's one of those locations. So every film that has an abandoned tower block now, I'm like, yeah, we've shot there. Yeah, there it is again. But the crew, we were, having sort of drinks and celebrating it's a tough shoot. It was long. Well, actually, it wasn't that long hours. We were pretty good to our casting crew actually. But for Roxy, the producer, and I, and the rest of the main core crew, it was a long passion project. So we're sort of having beers and everything, and the rest of the crew are like, surely there's going to be a feature version of this, surely this, surely that. And I'm like, absolutely not. This is the only version of the film. And then on the drive back, I was like, I've just worked out how the feature version of this would work, and it's good. But that's also the thing. You then watch it with an audience when it's finished. And America was funny because American audiences really saw the humour in it, which English audiences didn't really see. There's one moment, one humour beat in there, which never really flew over here, and I was always like, drop the ball there. But American audiences, and that's not to say that they're,
it's just different sensibilities.
Different sensibilities. Yeah. It's a bit of a broader humour, but it's sort of what I imagine they see in Lock, Stock. It had that sort of element a little bit, that sort of slightly, brick top kind of tone to it. And you get inspired by that, and you go, you know what, I want more of that in my next one. So yeah, I think that to use audiences to not validate your work in terms of sort of numbers or recouping any cost or anything like that. Just in terms of audience experiences, that's what validates you as a filmmaker. Is if you sit there and watch a whole bunch of people totally slack-jawed at something that you've made, I'd imagine that's a good feeling. No, but it is great. There's a time in Sonoma where this guy came up with his kid after we showed Neon, and he was absolutely loved it, and all I could think was, my God, his kid's like 10, and our Q&A was pretty profanity laden. There's a lot of swearing going on. And then this woman came up to us the next day and was like, are you the couple who made Neon? And we were like, yes we are. And she was like, my husband wouldn't fucking stop talking about it and woke me up in the middle of the night, show me the damn trailer. And you just go like, that's the win, so I think the importance of audience is just, and as I'm getting older I'm seeing that more and more and more, and that's why I think I love shorts, and I can talk about that. I can talk about the difference between shorts and the importance of shorts compared to features, and why they are important as a separate thing. But that's where features is, obviously not just telling stories on a bigger canvas, but also getting them out there to bigger audiences, because it's a different game. And I think that's the, as I've got older, that's the passion now. That's the main thing.
I think that's certainly something we've found in doing the Big Picture Film Club events. So our events, we very specifically have a pop-up space where there's an actual screen, a proper projector. It's a screening room in a sense, because we intend to screen the films and show them as the filmmaker would intend. Like you're going through grading, the editing suite, and you're seeing it on this big canvas after you've done as many drafts as you can. And then I think to have someone just kind of watch it on their phone by themselves, there's something lost in that. Although I think that streaming medium on your phone, it's not going away anytime soon.
No.
But I think, again, there's just something, there's something that can't be replaced by, packing the cinema.
Well, it's a church. It's communal. And it is. You're with people. I mean, hopefully it's a good audience. And it's not. I sat next to a dude eating an apple once. It was like, out of all the fruit you could bring into a cinema, an apple, like a banana's a mostly silent fruit. An apple is not, and it's a really crisp Granny. So I don't know. It was dark. I assume it was a Granny Smith. But if you get a great audience, it is such a and it really is it's a big deal, it's like, it's the difference between listening to, most of the music you listen to is iPod, iPod, iPhone even, iPods, I don't know if anyone uses those anymore, but you know what I mean. I bought hi-fi for the first time in ages a couple of years ago, because I realised I was playing everything out of laptop speakers, and it's like, get the meaty sound, but there's still no substitute for going to a gig, and it's exactly the same with the cinema. You want to see a film, you go see it in the cinema, you pay your money, you sit with strangers as well. That's the other thing. You watch a great film with a great audience with strangers, and you all get that kick. Everyone gets elated at the same moment, everyone gets disappointed, everyone cries at the same moment. There's nothing like it, and the best film experiences I've ever had have all been cinema based. I've never been at home going, I love my Blu-rays, I collect, I love Criterion, I love Arrow, I love getting all the extras and really digging deep into how the stuff's made. But I very rarely do I sort of think, I remember when I cracked open that DVD of, Fortress with Christopher Lambert and revisited my favourite film from '94. It's not, you want that cinema, that theatrical experience. And I think that's why repertory cinemas are having such a thing now. Like, if you want to go see like Demons 1 and 2 back to back, Prince Charles are doing that in a couple of weeks. You want to go see whatever, Marathon Man in 35mm. It's a knackered old print, but you're watching, best Dustin Hoffman film ever made on 35. It's The French Connection, anything Friedkin in the cinema. And also it's a different experience. It really is. You're not checking your phone every 2 minutes. You're not, I could pop across the road and get a bottle of wine, if that takes your fancy. I don't drink. It's a really, really long answer to a question. Yes, cinema.
I'd like to thank you because back in May you done a guest article for us.
Yes.
And that was the 5, well, not necessarily must-see film. It was 5 sci-fi films that kind of would take you into the world of sci-fi and kind of let you figure out what sci-fi was about. And so I've got the list here. Yeah, I'll read out. And
thank you for posting. It's a lovely article. It's the most, in all honesty, it was the most difficult thing I've probably ever had to write. whittling those lists out. I've only just got a top 10 list of my favourite films after however many years. Top 5, I know, top 10, tough, really tough. And to whittle down top 5 sci-fi movies, it was I think I took about 6 weeks off work for it.
Yeah.
It's stressful.
So the list is as follows, and we'll post this somewhere again. Pi, Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer, A Clockwork Orange, Miracle Mile, and Strange Days. And like, in the article that you've kind of gone into depth about, your thoughts on each of them, but just kind of like an overview on sci-fi. What makes good sci-fi in your opinion? Also coming from Neon.
I think for me it's sort of anything that's, and it's tough because it's, genre means so many things to different people. For science fiction, for some people it's escapism, for some people it's optimistic, for some people, for me it's, like that list, it's incredibly pessimistic. But I think sci-fi for me is kind of a, I use the term Black Mirror. It is science fiction as a tool to look at a really, here's all the shitty stuff going on in the world. And I think those films really display that. Each film's sort of very different in its own right, but they're very kind of negative views of what science can do to the individual, to sort of dehumanize them, or to, lessen their humanity, I guess. It's science fiction for me, I think, is challenging. I say fantasy's optimistic. I use Lord of the Rings as an example, but you've got these 9-hour 200 million thousand page books, but they're ultimately optimistic stories about people coming together and overcoming evil. All these different creeds and races and everything, goblins and whatever, all coming together and, beating the big bad, whereas science fiction's much more of a personal challenge, I tend to find, and I think it says a lot more, they tend to say a lot more about society. So I think for me, science fiction's about what the challenges are that face humanity, because also science is, it's not magic, science is real science. You laugh at something like Tetsuo 2 Body Hammer, and the guy's, spouting gun cannons all over his body and turning himself into a literal weapon, and obviously we're not at that stage, but we're at the stage of being able to 3D print a gun in 5 minutes, or however long I read it was 5 minutes. But it's insane, and you kind of think of the speed of technology and the ability to weaponize something out of resin, and it's scary stuff. You look at seconds being able to change your whole, seconds I should have kind of hit on there, but it's so left field, and technically I don't think it's science fiction in a way, even though it is, and it was a tough one not to include in there. But it's, people having plastic surgery to pretend to be someone else. That happens. How often does that happen now? I used to be Matthew McConaughey. I used to be 6'5". No, it's but yeah, it's. I think for me, it's, and I'm sort of not a pessimistic person. Like all my stuff's super dark. Yeah. But that's because that's the way I enjoy telling stories, but also the kind of stories that I enjoy. It's not necessarily indicative of me. I'm not like a serial killer or this or that.
Oh, that's glad to be.
It'd be useless for me to admit it on camera. But yeah, I think that's science fiction for me. It's the fear, it's the fear of what can happen rather than the optimism of what should happen. I think the difference between sci-fi and fantasy. And
kind of with your list and how technology in the real world, quote unquote, is kind of moving forward, how do you envision any changes in how we talk about sci-fi, or how sci-fi is produced in the future?
Oof. God,
so
a
future about the future in some way.
I don't know. I mean, all I know is I'd love to see a Logan's Run remake. That's the only thing I can say on that. I mean, in terms of, it's sort of interesting, like sort of stuff's getting kind of retro, and you look at Stranger Things, which has that 80s kind of Monster Squad, Goonies, John Carpenter, Stephen King horror. You've got First Man coming out, which even though it's a drama, people are really excited or really angry about the science, being represented correctly or incorrectly in terms of the Apollo missions and everything. I think we're kind of at an interesting stage where I think science fiction may go the way horror's gone. Horror's really huge again, which is so exciting, and it's great. And I think it's because all the audiences in the 80s and 90s are now adults, and they're going like, these people want to see the stuff that they were sort of having to like battle to see illegally, not illegally, but Predator on VHS or RoboCop or whatever. Now they can do it as adults, and people are realizing there's big bank in that. I think science fiction, I hope science fiction is going to kind of start to gear up like that again. Sort of bigger stuff coming out, and there's some interesting bits and pieces. I mean, mainstream wise, you've got stuff like the Power Rangers movie. They kind of misfires, but studios are pumping money into kind of science fiction again a little bit. Look at Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
Never thought I'd see that, and I have my reservations about the film. I have my huge positives about the film, but it's a 2.5 hour, very slow burn, not character piece, it's a mood piece, and it's a hefty budget has been allocated to that, and it's wonderful to see, and obviously didn't make the money they hoped it would, but I think it's going to sort of get to that stage where they're sort of seeing the good in it. Like, I'd love to get that resurgence of stuff like the Omega Man and Soylent Green and those old 70s kind of paranoia science fiction movies, because that's where my head's
at. Lastly, like, where can we find your work, particularly like Animus and Neon? I know that was posted up.
Neon is neonshortfilm.com.
Wonderful.
Or, if you want to be patriotic, neonshortfilm.co.uk. And Animus is on YouTube. I don't know the link because it's one of those really long, crazy ass YouTube links. But it's on my website. If you go to www.mjblackman.com, and then there's a films tab, and then beneath that there's it's actually the trailer to Neon, but there's a link to the site for Neon, and I think it's Animus, and then a link to the full film of Animus.
Awesome.
And a bunch of previous other shorts and music
Post
videos
it up
and stuff.
on Big Picture Film Club as well.
Cool.
Mark, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. That's a wrap.